Hi everyone, Steve here with dpgear.com, and in this video I'm going to be going over Canon digital SLR lens choices for video. Most Canon digital SLRs now come with the capability to shoot video, and it's a really great feature. It's awesome that most camera makers pack in both still photography and videography into one simple package. And the quality of the video that come out of these digital SLRs now is really good. And it's great because with the interchangeable lens system of a DSLR, you can get different angles, different perspectives, and really kind of shoot video in a more professional way than you could ever before. So the question comes up a lot, what type of lens is good for video, or what should I look for in a video lens? And the answer, unfortunately, is not very simple. It's a lot like asking what's the best lens for photography, or what should I look for in a lens for still photography. It really depends on what you shoot, what your budget is, and what type of sensor that your camera has. If you're shooting sports or wildlife, you're going to want a longer telephoto lens, whereas if you're filming landscapes, you're going to want something wide. And so it really depends on a lot of factors, but there are some things you should look for, and I'm going to give you some tips on how to choose a video lens. So jumping right in, the first thing that I want to talk about is your focusing. Most videographers using a DSLR use manual focus. It gives them a lot more control, a lot more freedom, and the autofocus on your lens, on your digital SLR, if you're shooting video, can be jumpy, jittery, and really not that accurate. So I definitely recommend using the manual focus. So what you want to look for in a lens is that if it has a focus ring that is not only smooth and has a nice positive feel to it, and preferably damped, it'll give you a little better feedback. But also you're going to want to look for a lens that has more turns of rotation, going lock to lock, or going from its minimum focus distance to its focus to infinity. If it just has like half a rotation from its minimum focus distance to infinity, it's not going to be as easy to use as a lens that has a couple turns going from minimum focus distance all the way to infinity. It'll give you more room for precision, and it'll really be able to let you fine-tune your focusing more easily than a lens that has not a lot of rotation. Also, one more thing about manual focus versus autofocus is that using the autofocus, it uses a motor, so that sound that the motor creates can sometimes be heard within your film if you're using the built-in mic. So it's just another reason to use manual focus. The next thing I want to talk about is image stabilization. And if you're shooting handheld or filming handheld, it's probably best to leave the image stabilization on. It'll smooth out your video and really correct a lot of the camera shake, just to make your film more smooth and nicer looking. If you're filming on a tripod, you could just use a lens that doesn't have IS, or turn the IS off, because if you're using a tripod, it's already steady and you don't want the IS engaging when it doesn't have to. And much like the autofocus motor, the image stabilization motor can sometimes be heard within your film if you're using the built-in mic as well. So that's an advantage for leaving it off, especially if you're shooting on a tripod. If you are using the IS handheld, keep in mind that the IS is constantly engaged, so will drain your battery more quickly than shooting still photography, when the IS is usually on for a couple seconds and then turns off when you take your picture. For videography, it's on all the time, so it will drain your battery more quickly, so keep that in mind. Shooting video, usually you want to err on the side of wider than tighter, just because you're capturing motion, you're capturing movement, and you're moving the camera around. It's easier to shoot wider than it is to shoot tighter. So if you're going to have a couple different lenses, I suggest investing more in the wide lens than the telephoto lens, just because for most purposes it tends to be more useful. Obviously if you're shooting sports or wildlife, you're going to want a longer telephoto lens. So it's very dependent on what you shoot, but generally I would err on the side of a wider lens. Another thing to keep in mind when you're shooting video is that your shutter speed is, or your frames per second in videography, is fixed. So if you're shooting at, let's say, 24 frames per second, that's basically having your shutter speed fixed at 1/24 of a second. So all you have to play around with is your aperture and your ISO. So it eliminates shutter speed, that variable. So getting a lens that has a wider maximum aperture not only gives you more room to play around with in terms of light gathering, but it also gives you more creative control over your depth of focus. So keep that in mind, and yeah, just remember that your shutter speed is going to be something you can't use to adjust your exposure. Much like photography, the quality and the speed of your lens comes into play. You definitely want, the best quality that you can get, and the fastest lens you can get. So I would say that it's not quite as important with as with still photography, just because you're not going to be scrutinizing every frame of your video, but it's still important if you want good color and contrast and good build quality as well. So I have a couple of recommendations for different levels of budget, and this is just kind of for general everyday use. So obviously if you have a specialized area of videography, you can veer away from these recommendations, but as just as a starting point, these are some of the things that I recommend. If you're just starting out, it's your first SLR, and you're on a bit of a budget, definitely just start off with the kit lens. It's most likely going to be the Canon 18 to 55mm EFS mount with IS. It's a great place to start with, great general everyday use range of focal length. If you feel like you need something a little more telephoto, a little longer, a great lens that pairs with it is the 55 to 250mm, which is also an EFS mount, and also has the image stabilizer built in. Great first prime lens to play around with, 50mm f1.8, the Nifty 50 as everyone calls it. It's kind of considered to be the gold standard for beginner prime lenses, and can definitely recommend that lens. It has really good image quality for the price, and definitely one of the best, if not the best, beginner prime lens. If you have a little more money to play around with and you want to experiment with a few other lenses, they definitely make some in the mid-range. I would recommend the Canon 17 to 55mm. It's an f2.8, has image stabilizer, and yeah, it's pretty fast at f2.8. It's great for if you have an APS-C sensor SLR like the Rebel series, 60D or 7D. It's a great lens. Won't fit full frame, but yeah, on a crop body, it's definitely a great general walk-around lens. If you want an ultra-wide, the EFS 10 to 22, really good. Or if you want something that kind of covers it all, I'd recommend the 18 to 135mm EFS. It has IS and pretty good image quality as well. And there are a few prime lenses that you might want to consider. They're faster, they're going to be sharper. The only thing is they don't zoom, so you lose a little bit of versatility for the sake of image quality. There's a really good 24mm f2.8. There's 35mm f2, 50mm f1.4, and an 85mm f1.8. Those are all really good. Like I said, err on the side of wider rather than telephoto, for video at least. That's just my personal recommendation, but that's what I would do. If you have a higher budget, now we're going to get into the L series of Canon lenses. The L series is the professional grade quality, and really sharp, really good build quality and color, contrast, and are generally faster lenses as well. I'll start off by saying any of the prime lenses for video are going to be really good. There are basically 3 zoom lenses that I recommend. One being the 16 to 35mm f2.8, the second being the 24 to 70mm f2.8, and the third being the 70 to 200mm, ideally f2.8, or they also make an f4 version. So those are some of my recommendations. You're going to find that those recommendations for video pretty much mirror my recommendations for still photography as well, just because they are closely related. But yeah, those are some really great lenses, and I definitely can recommend all of them. So join me next time when I review some more gear and give you some more great tips here on digitalphotographygear.com.